Hello there. Welcome to Sumit Academy. This is the second of my two-part video on the types of terrorism and the fourth video in my series on terrorism. The second type of terrorism is religious terrorism. That is, terrorism carried out based on motivations and goals that have a predominantly religious character or influence. Now, religious terrorism is particularly dangerous due to the fanaticism of those who practice it and their willingness to sacrifice themselves for the cause. Religious extremism has become the main driver of terrorism in recent years. Now, this is due to religious teachings used to justify and even encourage this kind of self-sacrifice. Al-Qaeda and ISIS are the most prominent examples of groups that can be characterized as religious terrorists. Moving on to our third type of terrorism, and this is right-wing terrorism, which aims to combat liberal governments and preserve traditional social orders. It is commonly characterized by militias and gangs. Many of these groups are racially motivated and aim to marginalize minorities within a state. Right-wing terrorism is terrorism motivated by a variety of ideologies and beliefs, including anti-communism, anti-fascism, and a mindset against abortion. This type of terrorism has been sporadic, with little or no international cooperation. Modern radical right-wing terrorism first appeared in Western Europe in the 1980s and in Eastern Europe following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Right-wing terrorists aim to overthrow governments and replace them with nationalist or fascist-oriented regimes. Moving on from right-wing terrorism to the other extreme, and that is left-wing terrorism. Sometimes called Marxist-Leninist terrorism or revolutionary or left-wing terrorism, it is meant to overthrow conservative or capitalist systems and replace them with communist or socialist societies. They want to attack the established system in order to do away with the class distinction. While these groups still exist, they are not as prominent as they were during the Cold War. The fifth aspect of terrorism is pathological terrorism. This describes the use of terrorisms by individuals who utilize such strategies for the, believe it or not, sheer joy of killing people and terrorizing others. Pathological terrorists often operate alone rather than in groups and often lack any well-defined political motive. Pathological terrorism is most commonly seen in school shootings and serial killing scenarios. The shootings at American schools serve as examples of pathological terrorism, since those who carried them out sought to use violence to terrorize for their own pleasure. The sixth type, issue-oriented terrorism, is carried out for the purpose of advancing a specific issue. Now, these issues are usually social in nature or deal with the environment. Here, this definition is used to include environmental terrorism. The bombings of abortion clinics and the assault of whaling ships are the best examples of issue-oriented terrorism. The seventh type of terrorism is called separatist terrorism. Separatists seek to cause fragmentation within a country and establishment of a new state. This type of terrorism is typical of minorities within a nation state that desire their own, commonly due to discrimination from the majority group. The eighth type of terrorism is narco terrorism. This term originally refers to organizations that gain funds through the sale of drugs. It can also deal with the use of violence by those groups or gangs designed to make the sale of their drugs easier. The ninth type is cyber terrorism. Until recently, terrorism had been associated with physical acts of violence and crime. For example, killings, bombings, kidnapping, destruction of property, etc. Starting in the 20th century, the increasing advent of technology, and more specifically systems controlled by computers, has seen a new form of criminal activity. And this has law enforcement quite worried. And this is called cyber threats. They combine destruction of physical or virtual property with financial crime, propaganda, economic warfare, and possible physically harm to innocent civilian lives. Cyber terrorism is relatively young in its evolution and has been associated with individuals, terrorist groups, and state actors or countries, which in particular could escalate into a cyber war, which does not seem to be that ahead in the future. It can happen any time of the day or night. The 10th and last type of terrorism is eco-terrorism. It is a recently coined term describing violence in the interests of environmentalism. Eco-terrorism involves acts of violence or destruction intended to curb human alteration to the environment or animal species. These acts tend to target forestation projects, recreational use of wilderness, hydroelectric operations, land-based telecommunication and energy services, animal research laboratories, resource production, and agricultural developments. So these were the 10 types of terrorism which are prevalent in our world today. And well, that's all from me in this, the second of my two-part video on the types of terrorism. As usual, I hope you do not forget to like this video and do subscribe to my channel so that you do not miss out on my future videos. Now, my next video will be on trends in terrorism. So don't miss that video too. In the meantime, do write in with your suggestions to sumitacademy20@gmail.com. Cheers.